I think that it's safe to say that this is one of the biggest enemies that players encounter when they are playing Path of Exile. This huge, humongous passive skill tree that you have right here. A lot of people is going to tell you that it is actually not that difficult to understand. But to some extent, yes, it is. It requires like some kind of knowledge. It requires for you to plan your build before you start playing. This is a very, very difficult game. So it is very, very important for you to understand how this works. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to you. I'm also going to be using my method. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be discussing in here, it's the way that I understand for this to make my builds. And it has worked pretty well for me. So the first thing that you need to have in mind is that you need to determine a playstyle. Yes, this game encourages for you to play with a whole bunch of different things. Any class, like the class doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters for the class is where are you going to start. So for example, the warrior, he starts in here, and the colors of the stats that the passive skills that you see in here are usually going to be red, because that's usually what you're going to be getting your stuff from. And then usually, for example, the monk, which is somewhat of a hybrid between a warrior and a elemental mage or sorcerer, he's going to start in here because it's easy for him to branch into the warrior and to branch into the sorcerer in here. The sorcerer is going to start in here because it's easier for the sorcerer to branch into the mana stuff that you have in here. And for example, the mercenary and the rangers, they start in here because it's easier for them to the mercenary branches into warrior stuff, and then the ranger he branches into this green stuff right in here. The first thing that you need to have in mind, and what's really going to ultimately determine your build and your playstyle, is going to be the ascendancy of your class. That's what's ultimately going to alter what is it that your character is going to do, although that is not to say that you cannot do whatever that you would want to do. So for example, a warrior, if you wanted to do so, it's a funky thing to do, but it's definitely something that you can do. For example, as a warrior, you can go into the mana stuff in here and build for elemental types of things and use elemental skills if you feel, let's say, we do not know what's meta right now, but I have noticed that, for example, some elemental attacks like cold and electric stuff are very, very easy to clean maps. So that's something that you can do if you want to do, while still retaining the vicinity to the tree in here for you to start building a proper warrior. That said, the warrior, for example, has the two ascendancies right now for the Titan, and then for the Warbringer. We're not going to be discussing every single ascendancy in this video because it would just take too long, and I want for this to be diluted information that you can properly understand, and essentially learn what before you start playing. Go to the webpage, the official webpage, and see what is it that each ascendancy is going to do. So for example, the Titan bases everything around melee damage, smash damage, AoE damage, and usually your boink kind of character. So that's what you're going to be building before you actually get to that ascendancy. But for example, the Warbringer, he's exceptionally useful when it comes to totems. He's going to empower totems. So for example, if you want to build the Warbringer, then you're probably going to be building a totems kind of character, which is what's going to bring us into how do I do such a thing. So I like to diversify my passive skills into 4 different sections. There's the basic skills. The basic skills are usually going to give you, like the name suggests, basic stuff. Like for example, melee damage. It could be melee damage, it could be life per second, it could be stun threshold. This is going to determine ultimately what you're going to want to do with your character. Remember, if we're building towards, for example, the Titan, I want to have melee damage. But I also want to have, for example, you can use this VOD. This is going to be very, very important for you to use and to understand. Because for a Titan, for example, I can type in here two-hand, and that's going to highlight what is it that I should be taking. So for example, here I have the 200 damage, 12%, 12%, 12%. This is very, very powerful and very important. And then there's a second basic passive skill, which is the stats. And this is one of the most important things that you need to have in mind when you are building a character, because this is what's going to allow you to traverse, to reach certain things that you want to reach. So for example, then you have the bigger nodes. Let's actually talk about the medium nodes first. The medium nodes are always going to be amazing benefits that you should always be taking, but only if they are relevant to your overall build idea that you have. So for example, in here, this one from here, it's going to increase the stun build-up, the melee damage, and then the strength. All of that is very useful for my build, which I'm trying to build. And we also have, for example, in here this 30 metal. If you're building a tank, you have 80% increased armor from body armor. But this is also very important, something that you do not need to branch out that much, and it's also very important for the survivability for every character. However, this is armor, there's also evasion, so these are just basic stats. Those are going to be massive boosts. The final passive point that well, there's also the jewel sockets. I don't have any jewels, and there's also this one I forgot to mention, but yeah, there's jewels that are going to give you fancy little things in here. But the final one that you're going to have right here, it's the big nodes, the large nodes. These are going to be build determining passive skills. They are going to give you something in exchange for something. You're going to gain something whenever you lose something, and these are going to determine your build. Usually when you're building towards this kind of stuff, you need to find some way to compensate on what is it that you are losing. I'll give you an example of the character build that I am building right now. I'm building a 200 warrior. I'm building something that I want to be using heavy boinkers in each my hands. I'm probably going to be using shields, so I'm building towards Giant's Blood. Remember why I told you that the stats nodes are more important? These are the ones that you are going to be using to traverse, to reach your goals faster. And for example, if I'm building towards Giant's Blood, instead of taking these little small nodes that are on the long term going to give me kind of cool stuff, they are not going to change my build depending on what I want to build, how I want to build my build. So if I build a 200, and if I, let's say, want to take this guys right in here, none of these are going to ultimately be very important for the kind of build that I'm having. So if I somehow get stuck in here and I need to go through here to finally reach this place, I'm going to have increased block chance, and I'm not going to be using shields because I'm focusing myself on two-handing weapons. However, if I build towards a stat node in here, I can reach this thing really fast, even though that I am not that much of a high level, giving me a huge power spike for my build. If on the other hand, at the same time, I'm looking for things that I know that I need, for example, to hand in here, I know that I can take all of these little nodes in here, and these are going to be huge power boosts for my character. Later on, I want to take as well 200 damage, because this is 12% 200 damage, all these guys right here. And then we have Overwhelm, which is, yes, it is going to reduce my attack speed, but it's also going to increase my stun build up and increase my damage with 200 weapons by 40%. But then again, to get there, I need to go through all of this stuff right here. It's very much easier to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels, 7 points in here, and that's going to be much easier than go through all of these little nodes in here that I do not need for my playstyle. Have in mind as well that I told you that whenever you're building towards a large node, you also want to be building towards making up for that extra little thing that you are losing in here. So Giant's Blood, what's going to allow me to do is that you're going to be able to wield two-handed axes, maces, and swords in one hand, meaning that you can have a two-handed sword and a shield, or dual wielding two-handed swords. But the downside is that it triples the attribute requirements of the weapon. Which is why, since they are strength required, which is why I'm taking so much strength in here as I build my way in here, so that this is not a deterrence for me once I get here. And this is something that you're going to want to do for every type of build that you have. Let's take a look at another one of the lodge notes in here. For example, this one right here. The unwavering stance. Your stun threshold is doubled, meaning that this is amazing for a stunning build. You want to make a something that is always staggering things. It doubles it. It's just amazing. It's amazing. But you cannot dodge roll. So that's a bummer. How do I compensate that? Well, probably a good idea would be to build this with a tank. Why a tank? Because the tank uses a shield, and if you type in here shield, then you can find things that compensate the dodge in here that you're not going to have, and you're going to be empowering your shield with increased defenses from the equipped shield, or maybe have more block chance and things like that. We have this node in here, this amazing node right in here, which is going to the attack skills deal increased damage while holding a shield. This is also going to increase your DPS. So yes, maybe this node is going to prevent for you from rolling, but if you're building towards your shield, that's not going to matter that much. That is essentially how building a character in Path of Exile works. I cannot stress enough, yes, there is respec in this game, but I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to start planning the build that you're going to use. Let me give you one final example. This is a base for a build for a Titan, but if you want to be building for a Warbringer, then you have also the totems in here. To reach these nodes in here, probably this is not going to be that important for you. So instead, you can take some stats in here, take all of these guys in here, and then you also want to reach these guys right here. But probably the path together, it's really not that appealing to you, because, for example, this is bleeding. This is for a bleed build-up, and you don't want to build towards bleeding. So instead of that, you can take the stat notes in here. This is a very, very good one, the strength, and then you immediately jump all of the things that you don't need right here to get to the ones that you actually do need to use. So that's the gist of everything. Find the ones that you want to use stat notes to use the ones that you want to get, and ignore the ones that are not going to alter your build. Anyways, if you like the content, like and never super appreciated. Not only today you are just a beautiful person, you're in the you're just a beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, have a beautiful day, goodbye.